Once upon a tabletop, some adventurers gathered to do stuff. Yeah, that's the best I've got today. Hey everyone, I'm Jonathan Rutledge, and this is episode 9 of Colonial Caerdia, Lark's Landing, a 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons campaign being played at a local hobby shop called the Devil's Bench. Last week, we left our heroes in a sorry state. They had gone out into the jungle looking for trouble, and they found it in the form of a pack of tigers. Balazar, the Dragonborn cleric, nearly died, and the others aren't looking so good either. Having exhausted his mental powers, Gilligan the human mystic has become an idiot. The group collect the teeth from the 2 saber-toothed tigers, and skin 3 of the beasts. The 4th one, Balazar, tries to behead. He's angry at it for nearly killing him. However, he makes a mess of it, and he has to get Shen, the Dwarven Ranger, to help finish it off. While handling their kills, Shen begins to notice that the jungle is a lot quieter than it should be. Having entered the trees making lots of noise he hadn't noticed before. Now he starts to notice rustling in the bushes around the edges of the battleground. He warns the others that it might be time to go, just as lizard-like heads poke out of the brush. These are smaller than the ones they fought before and are feathered, but there do seem to be an awful lot of them. Thinking quickly, Shen cuts a chunk of meat off of one of the tigers and tosses it to them. The reptiles mob it and more come out of the brushes, fighting over the small piece of meat. They then turn their attention on the adventurers and the other carcasses. The group decides it's time to flee. Kordak, the half-orc fighter, picks up the useless Gilligan. They run for the settlement. As they do so, they see a mob of the creatures come out of the brushes and converge on the carcasses. However, there are so many of them fighting over the meat that a group of them decide to go after the adventurers. It's a long run back to camp with the creatures on their tails. Partly along the way, they see some giant spiders up in the trees, but they quickly outdistance them. They burst out into the cleared ground around the settlement, calling for the militia. Armed men and women run to help. However, when the lizard-like creatures realize they've left the cover of the jungle, they turn around and flee. With the militia beside them, Shend and Kordak approach the edge of the jungle and try to lure the creatures out. However, it seems that the lizards gave up on their prey. Wounded, exhausted, and dealing with an incapacitated party member, the group decide to go home to sleep. But first, Balazar goes off alone with his tiger's head. Going out to the beach, he sets it on fire, then kicks it out into the ocean. It's something between an offering to his goddess Apesta and a prayer that he won't come that close to death ever again. The next morning, everyone has recovered and Gilligan is back to normal. Stor the goblin monk and Acta the tiefling warlock ask Gilligan what happened to him. He tells them that his mind was simply exhausted by the amount of power he expended that day. Stor pushes him a bit further, asking him about the source of his powers. Gilligan says it's too hard to explain and won't give them any straight answers. Stor, Kordak, and Shend head out to the tanner they know to get their tiger hides tanned. Next they head out to the edge of the jungle in search of a beehive that Stor knows the location of. He and Kordak want some honey to start making mead. They smoke the bees out and manage to get the hive without getting stung. They get it home, and Stor and Kordak spend the rest of the day gathering materials and preparing their mead. Acta heads out to the beach with her conch shell and perfects the art of blowing into it to make a lovely sound. Gilligan, with some direction from Kordak, decides to use his powers to build some towers for the wall. He spends the day making 4 of them. Shend and Balazar head out into the community. Shend is looking for someone to teach him to make arrows, and Balazar is looking for someone to make his saber-toothed tiger tooth into a necklace. They don't find anyone, so they go to their last resort, Naldor. Balazar waits outside the general store while Shend goes in. Shend asks Naldor where he gets his arrows from. The shopkeeper points him in the direction of Orpho, a human who does nothing but make arrows all day. He says that he can find him along the beach. Then Shend asks about jewelry, and Naldor points him in the direction of a halfling named Dilmi. Shend then returns to Balazar, who's started looking for critters that he might release into Naldor's shop. Unsuccessfully. With the new information, Balazar heads off, and after asking around for a while, finds Dilmi chopping wood. The halfling says she can make the saber-toothed tiger tooth into a necklace, but she needs something for doing the fitting. Since the mine isn't up and running yet, metal is scarce. So Balazar asks if a gold coin would work. Dilmi says it will and takes the item, saying that it will be a few days before it's ready. Down on the beach, Shend finds Orpho. The man is sitting with his back to a tree looking out over the ocean. On one side he has a pile of branches and on the other a pile of arrows. Shend engages him in conversation and quickly determines that Orpho isn't quite normal. The man seems to have a single-minded interest in making arrows. Shend shows him the arrowhead, and without even asking, Orpho takes it and attaches it to an arrow and hands it back. Grateful, Shend tries to pay him with one of the saber-toothed tiger teeth. Orpho is confused but accepts it, trying to figure out how he can turn it into an arrow. Then Shend asks if Orpho will teach him how to make arrows. The man is more than willing to, so Shend sits down beside him and begins his training. At the end of the day, when everyone's back home and going to sleep, Gilligan finds the tombstones inside his bedroll. He's immediately suspicious of his companions, but he can't figure out who is responsible. They all go to sleep. The next morning, Gilligan finishes off the final 3 towers along the wall. Storr goes down to Naldor's shop to ask about someone who could carve the saber-toothed tiger tooth into a knife. Naldor directs him to an elf named Quion. Storr manages to find him loafing around on the beach. Quion says he can carve the knife, but asks what's in it for him. As Storr is looking through his belongings to find out what he can trade, Quion notices his loot. He agrees to carve the knife in exchange for a song. By now, Shend has told the others about Orpho, this strange man who does nothing but make arrows. Seeing the possibilities, Kordak decides he wants to meet him. Balasar and Acta tag along. They offer Orpho a job making arrows for the militia. He seems ambivalent about the idea. They ask if he needs anything, but he says that Naldor makes sure he gets all the food he needs. Naldor is nice. When they offer him a place to stay, he says he found a nice little bamboo hut that someone abandoned. They immediately guess that it was probably Storr's hut. Nevertheless, he agrees that as long as some of his arrows keep going to Naldor, who feeds him and is very nice, the militia are welcome to take whatever arrows they want. Balasar keeps probing a little. He sees this as an opportunity to undermine Naldor's business. The best he can find is that Orpho doesn't have access to arrowheads. Orpho agrees that if they find him a source of arrowheads, he'll make sure that all those arrows go to the militia. Storr, seeing them from on the beach, rejoins them. Their business with Orpho completed, Shen returns to training Storr and Kordak in their perception. Balasar goes off searching for critters to release into Naldor's store. At least until Gilligan finds him and invites him back to the Singing Stone with a theory. Everyone decides to go along. Gilligan's theory is that the last time he and Balasar were hitting the stone, a thunderstorm came. Perhaps it was summoned by the stone. They arrive to find a couple of workers starting the mine. They're a little hesitant to experiment, but they proceed anyways. They start hitting the stone in unison. The melodic music of the Singing Stone becomes discordant. No storm arises. They decide to keep hitting it repeatedly. As they do so, the sound amplifies, getting louder and louder. They stop when it starts to hurt their ears. Still no storm comes, so they head home. The next day, Shen proposes that they go out hunting the lizards that had chased them out of the jungle before. Everyone agrees, but Gilligan has something he wants to do first. They head out to the Singing Stone and wait for several hours while Gilligan uses his power to build walls around the mine. That complete, they cut across the jungle to the location where they killed the tigers. As they travel, they come across a group that's out foraging. They warn them of the danger they've seen, but it's a large group and it should be safe. It's late in the afternoon when they arrive. Shen searches around for tracks, but he can't make enough sense of them to actually follow them. Balasar also takes a look at the tracks and has much more success. He's able to determine that what they saw before was probably several packs of the lizards. The majority of the group votes that since noise drew them in before, they should try that again. Storr hides in a bush and the rest scramble up trees. Acta blasts a note on her conch shell. The jungle quiets down. They wait for an hour with nothing more interesting than the sound gradually returning to the jungle. They try again. Another hour passes. They decide that this isn't really working, so they try something different. Acta and Balasar use their magics to create a strange odor and the sound of a dying animal. Again they wait. This time they have some success. The bushes all around on the ground begin to rustle as something comes in. They can't see what it is, so Balasar casts a light spell on an object and drops it down into their midst. The movement down below scatters. Cursing himself for accidentally driving them off, Balasar says they should try again. Another odor and more sound. More waiting. Nothing comes this time. At last they give up and start for home. About halfway home, the bushes on the sides begin to rustle. Out come a dozen of the little feathered reptiles attacking. It's almost as if they were waiting in ambush. The group fights back, but they're hard pressed. The lizards work in unison to distract and attack. Gilligan goes down unconscious and Balasar accepts an attack to get to his side and heal him. Slowly they work their way through, killing the creatures one by one until the last two flee. Not willing to let any of them get away, they use all the magic at their disposal to bring them down. They gather the bodies and head back to the settlement where they leave them with the food reserves. Then they head home for the night to nurse their wounds. And that's where this week's session comes to an end. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and why not consider leaving a comment letting me know what you think. If you want to support this channel, there's a link for that down in the doobly-doo, as well as a link to my website where you can buy the chainmail that I make. And that's it for today. Come back next week to find out what happens next, once upon a tabletop.